1. This has been happening for several years now. When I have a dream that will be déjà vu, I know it is déjà vu while still dreaming. This is pretty eerie and frightening for me. Let me give you some examples. I will be having a surprisingly realistic dream, in which I am surprisingly alert and aware of my surroundings. And then I get a strange feeling something is off. Suddenly it's like I'm watching a movie. I lose control and something horrific happens every time. I could be watching a movie with my girlfriend when suddenly a murderer slams through the door and stabs her multiple times. Or I'll be on a road trip with my friends when suddenly a semi swerves head-on into us. I'm having coffee in the city on a date when suddenly a plane crashes only a few blocks down. Each dream is unique and depends on my surroundings in my dream and who I'm with. This then throws me back into control, and at this time I wake up. But not really, I'm still dreaming. And I run to whoever it was in my dream and I tell them, I've had déjà vu. I tell them we can't do what we're planning, and we have to do something else, otherwise something awful will happen. They either dismiss me as crazy, or believe what I'm saying, and then I actually wake up. I wake up knowing that what I just dreamt is going to happen in the future, and it always does. However, I've managed to leave or interrupt it before whatever awful event happened in my dream. Example: months later, me and my girlfriend will be laying in bed watching Netflix, when suddenly I get a rush of panic. Now, obviously no murderers barge in, but I get an overwhelming feeling we are doing something wrong and we need to get out. I pass it off smoothly like, hey babe, let's go out instead. I miss spending time with you. Or I actually do go on a road trip with my family, and suddenly something looks familiar and I get that hairs on end, classic déjà vu feeling. I take the next exit to fill up on gas and take the back roads. If I walked into the coffee shop and recognized it from my plane crash dream, I would leave and never eat there. I've never not listened to this gut feeling, and I have no idea why I have these extremely graphic dreams with seemingly harmless déjà vu. And why I always wake up within my dream to warn loved ones of impending doom just to wake up normally, and have these mundane déjà vu experiences with such a feeling of panic. Does anyone else experience this? 2. I grew up in a small Welsh village in the UK called Llanrumney. Our school was sort of on the outskirts of the village, closer to the city of Cardiff. Every morning, me and a friend would walk to school, but boys being boys, we'd try and find the most pointless, longest, and possibly dangerous route to school possible. This ended with us entering the woods via a public footpath, then leaving the path and walking through the forest, following the Rhymney River. In the early mornings around winter, I remember the river would always have this eerie mist along its banks, which added to the creepy atmosphere. So there we were, two school lads in their Harry Potter-style uniforms, following a river to school when, suddenly, my friend stopped in his tracks and put his hand up to stop me walking into him. When I followed his gaze off to the right of the river, I saw it. You ever see something in your mind, even at 11, knows should not be there? I just stayed perfectly still for what felt like hours, just watching this creature plunge its huge beak into the rushing water, then rotating its giant head back to his wings. This was a bird that was bigger than anything I'd seen on annual school trips to the zoo. Think of the largest dog you've seen. You probably think something along the lines of a Great Dane. Well, imagine that, but twice as big. After a few more minutes of watching this thing bathe, me and my friend quietly walked away, leaving it in the river. We saw it often, at the exact same time and the exact same spot every day. We didn't tell many people about it because whenever we did and they'd walk to school with us, it was never there. So naturally our friends thought we were making it all up. I saw it one last time in the summer of 1997. I was walking to school by myself, and this time, I didn't just see it clean, I saw this thing take off. I have to tell you, when you see a bird that size flex its wingspan, I genuinely felt a little scared. But that's it. I never saw it again, and me and my friend have never really spoken about it. But I'll always remember it. Obviously, over the years I've done research trying to locate the breed of this bird, but I've never been able to find what I saw. Thanks for taking the time to listen to this. Gaz. 3. This winter my friend and I went on a one-day ski trip to the mountains of Colorado. We stayed at a decently cheap hotel to make up for the price of the lift tickets. When it got around 11 p.m., we were up watching TV and I was on my laptop just scrolling around on Facebook. My point is, we were not making any more noise than any of the other people in the hotel. That being said, about 5 minutes later, we got a few knocks at the dividing door between our room and the one to our left. I turned the TV down significantly and said, "Sorry," through the door. My friend stated how odd that was, and I agreed, and we both went back to what we were doing. Then, about 20 minutes later, the knocking came again, this time louder and angrier. I again went to the door and said, "What's going on?" And I heard the strangest thing on the other side. It sounded like a male voice, but before it spoke, there was a noise that sounded like when you let the air out of an inflatable bed. It responded with something that I couldn't seem to make out. Freaked out at this point, I decided to unlock the dividing door to our room to see what this person needed, and as soon as I turned the deadbolt and opened it 2 inches, their door flew open, and I heard the hiss very loudly. My friend yelled, "Close it!" and I slammed and locked it. No more than 30 seconds after I sat down, they began knocking aggressively, and the pattern got faster and faster. I told my friend to call the front desk to complain about the room next to ours, and we got a chilling response. No one had checked into that room, albeit for a while, as they were having some issues with the plumbing in that room specifically. After that, we attempted to sleep because we needed to wake up early to get to the ski hill. But it wasn't quite over yet. Around 4 a.m., the furious knocking began again, and it was so loud, it sounded like someone was bludgeoning on the door with a metal bat. I basically catapulted out of bed, knocked back on the door, and whispered loudly, "Just what exactly do you want?" The knocking stopped abruptly, and the weird-ass voice said something along the lines of, "We cannot escape." And then the slamming started again, louder than ever. I wasn't wanting to deal with this anymore in my grumpy NyQuil-induced coma, so I put my nose to the door and said angrily, "Well, we're trying to catch first chair tomorrow, so you're going to have to figure that one out yourself." With that, I took my skis, poles, and my friend's snowboard, and wedged them up against the door and went back to bed. Nothing more happened that night, but when I woke up, the skis and snowboard were back in the corner of the room, not where I wedged them up against the door. Would there be an easier explanation for this, besides something attempting to break into our universe, using a crappy hotel as a portal? 4. My girlfriend and I decided to go to a Wetherspoons near our flat. I live in England, UK, so if anyone outside of the UK doesn't know what a Wetherspoons is basically a pub that also serves food. Anyway, we sat down at a table next to an older lady, and what looked like her son aged about 11. Okay, so where we sat was like a small room, with no door near the doors to the pub, and there were 4 tables in that space, each one enough to fit 4 people on each table. There were only 2 of the 4 that were occupied, which includes mine and my girlfriend's table. Anyway, As soon as we sat down, one of the employees came through the archway, carrying 2 plates. He looked to the 2 unoccupied tables, then mine and my girlfriend's, and the other table with the mother and son. When he asked us if we ordered food, we replied, "No, not yet, we just sat down." He then was about to ask the mother and son when said mother said they had ordered food. He nodded his head and placed the 2 plates of food on the table in front of them. My girlfriend didn't take much notice after we replied to the employee. I was the one that saw him place them in front of the parent and son, and hear the conversation. Me and my girlfriend looked down at the menus to choose what to order. We chose, and my girlfriend went to the bar to order. That's where you order food at a place like this. Our 2 tables were placed next to the window, so when my girlfriend left to order, I was looking out of the window. People watching, as me and my girlfriend call it. Okay, back to the story. I was only looking out of the window for a couple of minutes, when I looked around and spotted the table next to us was on their mobile phones, and no food in front of them. No plates in sight on the table. I just saw the waiter place them. I then turned my head away from the 2 to look out of the window again. My girlfriend came back to sit down with our drinks. I put the whole plates appearing and disappearing out of my mind. After another 5 minutes, my girlfriend decided to nip to the bank to get some money. So I sat there on my own phone, watching people until I decided to play a game on my phone. Another 10 minutes later, our food came. So I got up to get the condiments and salt and pepper, and passed the next table. I saw they still didn't have any food. I carried on walking to the condiments table. I turned around and walked back to my table. The table next to us had food. Their table was only 10 steps away, so the waiter couldn't have placed their food down, and vanished back to the bar without me seeing them. When my girlfriend got back, I wanted to tell her, but I decided to wait to get back home and send my story on an email. The only explanation with this is there was a glitch in the matrix because I can't see how a waiter or waitress could just disappear in that amount of time. If you or anyone has a theory, then you're welcome to comment so I can see other views. 5. Okay. So I've recently begun digging into my family history on one of those record search websites to trace your bloodline and such. Along the way, I found that a cousin of mine had already been at it for a while, and they had quite a bit of info that I hadn't found yet. So I cheat and look at her family tree. I see that she has traced things back to our great-grandfather, who died in 1954. Wait, died in 1954? This can't be right, I thought. I know this wasn't right because my grandfather was still alive when I was a little kid. I met him. Or so I thought I met him. It's strange. There is an old black and white picture of him on the wall of my grandparents' house. And I know I met that man. He was much, much older than he was in the picture. But I am 100% sure it was him. The memory I have goes like this. I went to my grandparents' house for a visit in the late 80s. I had to be around 8 years old. My grandfather was sitting on the front porch, as he always did, and my dad tells me to greet him and shake his hand. We weren't a very affectionate family. Then my grandfather looked to my dad and said, "Take him into the kitchen so he can say hi to your grandpa." My dad then leads me through the house and to the kitchen. There in the middle of the kitchen with all my aunts, I see him. I see the man in the picture. He was sitting in a chair gripping a cane. He picked his head up and looked at me. I remember my dad introducing him to me, saying, "Son, this is my grandpa." He was very, very old. According to birth records, he was born in the late 1890s. He had to have been around 90. He put his hand out and I shook it. He didn't say anything, just smiled and looked at me. My dad then told me to go play, and I went out to the backyard with my cousins to chase chickens around or something. And that was it. That memory fragment feels very real to me, even to this day. I always thought I had met him. I know I met my great-grandfather, but turns out not even my father met him. Great-grandfather passed away 3 weeks before my father was born. I recently confirmed this with him. He had been dead for over 30 years when I thought I met him in the 1980s. Hey everyone, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to 5 True Glitch in the Matrix Stories 33. I'm sorry it's a little bit shorter this week. Hopefully we can have a longer one next week, if we all cross our fingers and toes, and I'll be able to find a few longer stories to keep you all entertained next week. We'll see what happens. I do have a little bit of an announcement. I did announce it on Twitter, but not everybody follows me on Twitter, so most of you wouldn't have heard it. But I have begun work proper on my next 30 True Scary Stories video. I'm about a third of the way through recording. I'm gonna get the next third of that done this weekend, and it's not due, as in I've picked the date. It's going to be at the end of the month. I'm not sure exactly when. Hang on, let me check. Right, it's probably going to be the 29th, because the 28th will be, well, the 28th will mark 1 year of me doing YouTube full-time as a profession. And I've been doing it a little bit longer than that, but that was actually when it became a proper job to me. So, to celebrate, we'll have a 30 stories video. And I'm going to put it out on Monday instead of Sunday, because Monday's a much better day for that kind of video. Okay, and with that I'm going to head off for now. So, until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.